I'm Elena, 48 years old, and what I saw at O'Hare International Airport didn't just break my heart, it shattered my entire reality. I thought I was coming home to a celebration. Instead, I walked straight into a crime scene where the victim was my marriage. Before I tell you how I sent my husband to prison using his own greed against him, tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I'd love to know who has my back. Let me take you back to that Tuesday afternoon. The air in Chicago was biting cold, typical for November, but I didn't feel it. I was warm with anticipation. I had just closed a grueling 3-week negotiation in New York regarding a commercial complex in Brooklyn. It was the kind of deal that secures a comfortable retirement. I was exhausted, my bones ached from the cramped airplane seat, and my eyes were gritty from lack of sleep. But I was happy. I had caught an earlier flight. I wanted to surprise Mark. Mark and I were approaching our 20th anniversary. 20 years. 2 decades of building a life, a portfolio, and a home in Lake Forest. I had texted him earlier that morning, telling him my meeting was running long and I wouldn't be back until Wednesday night. It was a little white lie. I wanted to walk through the door a day early, pop a bottle of that expensive Napa Valley Cabernet we'd been saving, and just be with him. I pulled my rolling suitcase through the arrivals hall at Terminal 1. The airport was chaotic, a sea of travelers rushing to find their Ubers or hugging their families. I scanned the crowd, looking for the exit signs, focused purely on getting a taxi. That's when I saw the back of a head I knew better than my own. It was the hair. Salt and pepper, perfectly styled, slightly long at the nape of the neck. He was wearing the camel-colored cashmere coat I had bought him for Christmas last year from Neiman Marcus. He was standing near the baggage claim exit, shifting his weight from foot to foot, checking his Rolex, another gift from me. My first instinct was pure confusion. How did he know? I smiled, my heart doing a little flutter. Had he tracked my flight? Did my assistant spill the beans? Mark was always trying to be the romantic lead in a movie, even if his execution was usually lacking. I adjusted my grip on my bag, ready to sneak up behind him and wrap my arms around his waist. But then, I stopped. Something was off. He wasn't looking at the exit where domestic passengers were flooding out. He was holding a sign. Mark never held signs. He thought they were tacky. But there he was, gripping a piece of white poster board with both hands. I stepped behind a large concrete pillar, about 20 feet away. My instinct to surprise him vanished, replaced by a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I squinted to read the sign. It didn't say Elena. It said, "Welcome home, Mom and Dad." I frowned. His parents were in Florida. My parents had passed away years ago. Who was Mom and Dad? Then, the automatic door slid open, and a young woman walked through. She couldn't have been more than 26. She had long, chestnut hair that bounced as she walked, and she was wearing a tight beige dress that left nothing to the imagination. She looked like a model, or one of those influencers I see my nieces watching on Instagram. And she was visibly, undeniably pregnant. I froze. The noise of the airport, the announcements, the chatter, the rolling wheels, faded into a dull hum. I watched, paralyzed, as Mark's face lit up. It wasn't just a smile, it was a look of adoration I hadn't seen directed at me in a decade. He dropped the sign. The woman squealed. She actually squealed. She dropped her carry-on bag and ran toward him. "Mark," she cried out. She threw her arms around his neck. My husband, my Mark, the man who complained about public displays of affection, caught her. He spun her around. And then, he did something that made bile rise in my throat. He knelt down. Right there on the dirty airport floor. He placed both of his hands on her protruding belly. He kissed it. He kissed her stomach with a reverence he had never shown anything in our life together. We had tried for kids, years ago. It hadn't happened. We stopped talking about it. Seeing him worshipping another woman's pregnancy felt like a knife twisting in an old, unhealed wound. "How is he?" I heard Mark ask, his voice carrying over the crowd. "How's my little linebacker?" "He missed his daddy," the woman cooed. Her voice was sugary, high-pitched. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the floor was tilting. I should have walked away. I should have screamed. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot by horror. Mark stood up and kissed her on the lips. Deeply. Passionately. Then, he reached into his coat pocket. "I have something for you," he said. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Please don't be jewelry. Please don't be the diamond earrings I asked for." It was worse. He pulled out a silver object. Even from 20 feet away, the fluorescent lights caught the glint of the custom Tiffany & Company keychain. I knew that keychain. I had bought it for him when we closed on our Lake Forest house 15 years ago. It was a silver house. "The renovation is done," Mark said, beaming. "She's out of town. It's finally time. Welcome home, sweetheart." He pressed the keys into her hand. My keys. The keys to the house I paid for. The house I designed. The house where I nursed him back to health when he had pneumonia, where I planned his 50th birthday party, where I thought we would grow old together. "Really?" the woman asked, her eyes widening. "She's gone?" "For good, eventually," Mark said, wrapping an arm around her waist. "But for now, we have the whole week. Just us. And the baby." He grabbed her luggage. She clung to his arm, rubbing that silver keychain with her thumb like it was a talisman. They began to walk toward the exit. They walked right past the pillar where I was hiding. I could smell her perfume, something cheap and overly floral, mixed with Mark's expensive sandalwood cologne. I saw the way his hand rested possessively on the small of her back. I stood there for a full 5 minutes after they disappeared through the sliding doors. People bumped into me. A security guard gave me a strange look. I was shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. My first thought was to run after them and cause a scene. I wanted to scratch his eyes out. I wanted to rip those keys from her hand. But then, a strange calm washed over me. It was the same calm I felt during high-stakes negotiations when the other side tried to screw me over. It was the cold clarity of a woman who realizes she has nothing left to lose. He gave her my house. He gave her a child. He gave her my life. I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling, but I managed to open the Uber app. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. Confrontation is for amateurs. Confrontation gives the enemy a chance to lie, to gaslight, to prepare a defense. No. I was going to destroy him. I typed in a destination. Not home. I couldn't go home. My home was currently being invaded. I typed in the address of a Motel 6 near the highway, about 5 miles from our neighborhood. As I waited for the car, I whispered to myself, "Enjoy the keys, Mark. Because they're the last thing you're ever going to own." Word count, approximate 1,650 words. I didn't go straight to the motel. I couldn't. I needed to see it. I needed to confirm that what I saw at the airport wasn't a hallucination induced by jet lag and exhaustion. I told the taxi driver to take me to Lake Forest. "Just drive past," I told him, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. "Don't stop." It was a 45-minute drive. I spent the entire time staring out the window at the gray Chicago skyline, replay the scene in my head. How long? That was the question looping in my brain. How long has this been going on? You don't get 6 months pregnant overnight. We turned onto my street. The oaks and maples were bare, skeletal fingers scratching against the twilight sky. The houses here were set back from the road, grand and imposing. We approached number 420. My house. A beautiful colonial brick estate with white pillars and black shutters. I had spent 3 years restoring it. I handpicked every light fixture, every tile. And there it was. Mark's black BMW was parked in the driveway. But it wasn't just the car. It was the house itself. The lights were on. Every single light on the first floor was blazing. The living room, the dining room, the kitchen. It looked festive. It looked welcoming. "Slow down a little," I told the driver. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, probably thinking I was a stalker. "You live here, ma'am?" "I used to think so," I murmured. Through the large bay window of the living room, I saw movement. The curtains were drawn but not fully closed. I saw a silhouette. Mark. He was holding 2 glasses of wine. He walked across the room and handed one to her. She was sitting on my beige velvet sofa. My sofa. The one I strictly forbade anyone from eating on. She had her feet up on the coffee table, my antique mahogany coffee table, and she was laughing. Mark bent down and kissed her forehead. It was a domestic tableau so perfect it made me want to vomit. They looked like the owners. They looked like they belonged there. And I was the stranger looking in from the cold, dark backseat of a taxi. Then, my phone buzzed. I looked down. A text message from Mark. "Mark, hubby, hey honey. Just wanted to say goodnight. Working late at the office again. Trying to clear the desk before you get back tomorrow. Miss you. Love you." I stared at the screen. The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of it. He was sitting in my living room, drinking my wine, with his pregnant mistress, texting me that he was at the office. He wasn't just cheating. He was mocking me. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was just the bank account that funded his lifestyle, the naive wife who would never suspect a thing. "Ma'am? You want me to keep driving?" the driver asked. "Yes," I said, my voice turning hard. "Get me out of here. Take me to the motel." As we drove away, leaving the warm glow of my stolen home behind, something inside me snapped. The sadness began to calcify into rage. Pure, high-octane rage. I checked into the motel under my maiden name. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. The carpet was sticky. It was a far cry from the Egyptian cotton sheets and down comforters waiting for Jessica back at my house. I sat on the edge of the sagging bed and opened my laptop. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I went to work. I am an investor. My job is to analyze risk, spot liabilities, and maximize assets. Tonight, Mark was the liability. And I was going to liquidate him. First, I needed to know who she was. I logged into our cell phone provider's website. Mark wasn't tech-savvy. He used the same password for everything, his birthday followed by when. Pathetic. I pulled up his call logs. There was one number that appeared constantly. 10 times a day. Video calls at midnight. Texts at 5 a.m. I put the number into a reverse lookup tool. Jessica Miller. The name hit me like a physical blow. Jessica. I knew Jessica. 3 years ago, Mark had begged me to hire an intern for his consulting firm, a business that was essentially a tax write-off I set up for him so he'd feel important. He said she was a bright kid from a tough background who needed a break. I met her. She was 23 then. Shy, eager to please, wearing scuffed shoes. I felt sorry for her. I took her shopping for interview clothes. I gave her advice on her resume. I even paid for a dental procedure she couldn't afford because her insurance hadn't kicked in yet. I treated her like a daughter. I treated her like a sister. "You're an angel, Elena," she had told me once, tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." "Apparently, you thank me by sleeping with my husband and getting pregnant with his child," I thought, staring at her name on the screen. The betrayal was double. It wasn't just Mark. It was the girl I had mentored. The girl I had let into my home for Christmas dinner when she said she had nowhere else to go. They had been playing me for years. I closed the browser tab and opened another one. My banking apps. This was where the real horror story began. I handled the big investments, but I let Mark manage the day-to-day household accounts. I thought it gave him a sense of control. I trusted him. I logged into our joint savings account. The one we called the Dream Villa Fund. We were supposed to buy a vacation home in Tuscany next year. There should have been nearly $400,000 in there. Balance, $1,240.50. I gasped. The air left my lungs. I clicked on the transaction history. Withdrawals. Constant withdrawals. The Ritz-Carlton. Tiffany & Company. Prenatal Yoga Center. Baby Dior. Cash withdrawal, $5,000. Cash withdrawal, $9,000. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was funding his new life with my money. He was building a nursery for his bastard child with the sweat of my labor. I checked the credit cards. Maxed out. I checked his business account. He had been draining equity from the line of credit I secured for the house renovations. He was bleeding me dry. But then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A calendar notification in his synced email, which I also accessed. Appointment, Thursday 10 a.m. City Hall. Title transfer. I clicked on the details. There was an attachment. A PDF. It was a quitclaim deed. A document transferring ownership of 420 Oakwood Drive, my house, from Elena and Mark Hawthorne to Mark Hawthorne solely. And at the bottom, there was a signature. Elena Hawthorne. It was my signature. But I hadn't signed it. It was a forgery. A decent one, but a forgery nonetheless. The plan was clear now. It wasn't just an affair. It was a takeover. Mark intended to transfer the house to his name while I was out of town, probably claiming I had signed it before I left. Then, he would file for divorce. With the house in his name and the bank accounts drained, he'd kick me to the curb and move Jessica in permanently. He was going to leave me homeless and penniless. I slammed the laptop shut. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From adrenaline. You made a mistake, Mark, I whispered to the empty, dingy motel room. You forgot who makes the money. You forgot who built the empire. And you definitely forgot about the trust. He didn't know. He couldn't know. The house wasn't technically in our names anymore. I had moved it into a protective trust 3 years ago when my business liability insurance rates went up. I made Mark sign the papers, telling him it was tax stuff. He never read what he signed. He just wanted the credit card with the high limit. The trust had a specific clause. A morality clause. And an unauthorized occupancy clause. If he tried to transfer the title, the fraud would be flagged immediately by the trustee, my lawyer. And if he moved a non-family member into the residence while still married to me, he forfeited his beneficiary status immediately. He thought he was playing chess. But he was playing checkers, and he was losing badly. I looked at the clock. 11:30 p.m. I had one day. I had tomorrow to set the trap. I wasn't going to stop the title transfer. No. I was going to let him try. I was going to let him commit a felony on public record. I laid back on the hard pillow, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. I didn't sleep. I plotted. I visualized every step of his destruction. Tomorrow, I wouldn't be the wife coming home early. Tomorrow, I would be the executioner. As the neon sign of the motel flickered outside my window, casting a rhythmic red glow across the room, I couldn't help but look back. How did I get here? How did a woman who manages multi-million-dollar commercial portfolios let a parasite attach itself to her soul for 20 years? Mark wasn't always a monster. Or maybe he was, and I was just too blinded by his charm to see the scales. We met in grad school. I was studying finance, he was an MBA student with a winning smile and big dreams. He was charismatic, the life of every party. I was the quiet one, the grinder, the one in the library until 2 a.m. He made me feel fun. He made me feel seen. When we got married, I was already climbing the corporate ladder. Mark jumped from job to job. First, it was sales, then marketing, then a startup that failed. He always had an excuse. The boss was an idiot. The market wasn't ready. They were jealous of my ideas. I supported him. I told him, "It's okay, honey. I make enough for both of us. Take your time. Find your passion." God, I was naive. His passion, it turned out, was spending my money. 5 years ago was the first major red flag. I came home early one day, ironic, isn't it, and found him sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. He was weeping. "I messed up, Elena," he sobbed. "I owe people money. Bad people. Gambling." He had blown $60,000 on online poker and sports betting. I should have left him then. My friends told me to leave him. But he looked so broken. He promised he would go to therapy. He promised he would handle the household chores, support my career, be the perfect house husband if I just bailed him out. So I wrote the check. I cleared his debt. And in return, he became resentful. That's the thing about leeches. They don't love the host. They resent the host for their own dependence. Mark hated that I was the breadwinner. He hated that the cars, the house, the vacations were all thanks to my hard work. He compensated by preening, by acting the big shot in public, by buying expensive suits and demanding the best tables at restaurants, all on my credit card. And then came Jessica. I realized now why he pushed so hard for me to hire her. It wasn't charity. It was grooming. I remembered a dinner about 6 months ago. The three of us. Mark, Jessica, and me. I had cooked a roast. Jessica was looking at Mark with those big, doe eyes. "Mark is so smart," she had said. "He knows so much about business. You're so lucky, Elena." I had laughed. "Yes, he's a dreamer," I said affectionately. I saw Mark's jaw tighten. "I'm not just a dreamer, Elena. I'm the visionary. You're just the logistics." The table had gone silent. I brushed it off as him having a bad day. Now I realize he was performing for her. He was painting a narrative where he was the genius shackled to a boring, controlling wife. And Jessica ate it up. Because she wanted the lifestyle I had earned, but she wanted the shortcut. She didn't want to work 80-hour weeks. She wanted to marry the boss. Little did she know, the boss was a fraud. I sat up in the motel bed, anger burning through the fatigue. Mark had told her he was rich. He had to. There was no way a girl like Jessica, obsessed with brands and status, would be with a broke 50-year-old man. He was funding this affair with my money to prove he was the man he pretended to be. He was buying her affection with my sweat. I opened my phone again. I needed more ammunition. I navigated to the security camera app. We had cameras everywhere, the front porch, the backyard, the garage, and one in the main hallway. Mark knew about them, of course, but he was arrogant. He probably thought I wouldn't check them while I was on a business trip. Or maybe he thought he had disabled them. He had unplugged the hallway camera. The screen showed connection lost. But he forgot about the nanny cam. We didn't have a nanny. But when my niece used to visit with her baby, we installed a small, hidden camera in the guest room, which was now apparently the nursery. It was disguised as a smoke detector. I activated the live feed. The room was dark, but the night vision was clear. I saw them. They were lying in the bed. The guest bed. I turned up the volume on my laptop. When she gets back tomorrow, Jessica's voice whispered. Are you sure she won't notice the money is gone? She never checks the savings, Mark scoffed. His voice was slurred. They must have finished that bottle of wine. She's too busy with her precious deals. She thinks I'm handling the accounts. By the time she realizes, the house will be in my name and I'll have filed the papers. She'll be so embarrassed about the divorce she'll settle just to keep it quiet. But what if she fights? With what? Mark laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. I've been documenting her instability for months. Telling friends she's stressed, paranoid, drinking too much. If she fights, I'll claim she's mentally unfit. The courts love a poor husband dealing with a crazy career woman. I covered my mouth to suppress a gasp. Instability? Drinking? I barely drank a glass of wine a week. He wasn't just planning to leave me. He was planning to gaslight everyone we knew. He was destroying my reputation before the battle even started. You're so smart, baby, Jessica cooed. I can't wait until she's gone. I want to paint this room pink. Pink it is, Mark said. Whatever you want. It's our house now. I stopped the recording. I saved the clip. I backed it up to the cloud, then to a USB drive I always kept in my laptop bag, then emailed it to myself. Mental instability, I muttered, closing the laptop. I stood up and walked to the motel bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. I looked tired. I looked older than I felt. But my eyes were clear. Okay, Mark, I said to my reflection. You want crazy? I'll show you crazy. But it wouldn't be the kind of crazy he expected. It wouldn't be screaming and throwing vases. It would be the calculated, cold-blooded precision of a woman who negotiates with sharks for a living. I was going to let him dig his grave a little deeper. I needed him to go to City Hall tomorrow. I needed him to file that forged deed. Once he did that, it wasn't a civil dispute anymore. It was a felony. I went back to bed, and for the first time in hours, I smiled. It was a terrifying smile. I set my alarm for 7 a.m. First stop, Robert Stone, Esquire. The meanest, most expensive divorce lawyer in Chicago. Second stop, the bank. Third stop, the showdown. I didn't sleep a wink. At 6 a.m., I was already showered and dressed in yesterday's clothes, a sharp navy pantsuit that, thankfully, still looked intimidating despite being slept in on a flight. I grabbed a bitter coffee from the motel lobby and drove straight to downtown Chicago. Robert Stone's office was in a glass tower overlooking the lake. He was an old friend of my father's, a man who charged $800 an hour and was worth every penny. He was the kind of lawyer who didn't just win cases, he annihilated the opposition. I didn't have an appointment, but his secretary took one look at my face and buzzed me in. Robert was sitting behind a desk the size of a small boat. He was 70, with a mane of white hair and eyes like a hawk. Elena? He stood up, concerned. You look like you're ready to kill someone. I might be, I said, placing my laptop on his desk. But I prefer to bankrupt them first. I spent the next hour laying it all out. I showed him the video from the airport, which I had thankfully managed to snap a few photos of from behind the pillar before fleeing. I played the audio from the nursery. I showed him the bank statements and the forged quitclaim deed PDF. Robert listened in silence. He didn't gasp. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just took notes on a yellow legal pad, his pen scratching furiously. When I finished, he leaned back and took off his glasses. The son of AB*TCH, he said softly. He forged your signature on a deed transfer? Yes. And he's planning to file it today. Robert's eyes gleamed. Elena, do you realize what he's handed us? If he files that document, he's committing forgery, fraud, and larceny. We don't just have grounds for divorce. We have leverage to strip him of everything. I know, I said. But I need to protect the assets before he drains the rest. He thinks the house is joint property. And he forgot about the Hawthorne Trust, Robert smirked. I drafted that trust myself. The morality clause is ironclad. Any beneficiary who engages in extramarital cohabitation in the primary residence immediately forfeits all rights to the trust's assets. By moving her in while you're still married, he effectively disinherited himself. I want him gone, Robert. Today. No, Robert held up a hand. Not today. If we storm in there now, he might claim it's a misunderstanding. He hasn't filed the deed yet. We need him to commit the crime. He leaned forward. We let him file the deed. We let him think he's won. We let him think you're still the clueless wife coming home tonight. In fact. Robert checked his watch. You need to play the loving wife one last time. What do you mean? Call him, Robert said. FaceTime him. Act like everything is normal. Tell him a lie so big, so tempting, that it freezes him in place. We need to make sure he doesn't run, and we need to make sure he thinks he's safe until the police arrive. Police? Oh yes, Robert smiled, a shark showing its teeth. I'm calling the district attorney. He owes me a favor. When we walk into that house, we aren't just serving divorce papers. We're serving an arrest warrant. I felt a shiver of dark anticipation. What should I tell him? Greed, Robert said. Greed is his weakness. Feed it. I nodded. I knew exactly what to do. I sat in Robert's plush leather guest chair and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I was in deal mode. I dialed Mark on FaceTime. It rang 3 times. Then his face appeared. He looked disheveled, hair messy, wearing a robe. My robe. Elena, he said, his voice cracking slightly. He cleared his throat. Honey. You're up early. I was just making coffee. In the background, I saw a flash of pink. Jessica's silk kimono. He quickly angled the camera away. Hi, darling, I said, forcing a bright, tired smile. I miss you so much. Miss you too, he said, glancing off camera nervously. Everything okay? You sound excited. I am. I gushed. Mark, you won't believe it. The deal in New York? It didn't just close. It exploded. The investors were so impressed they offered me a signing bonus for the next project. Mark's eyes widened. A bonus? How much? $500,000, I lied. $500,000. Wire transfer. It hits our joint account tomorrow morning. I watched his face. I saw the calculation. I saw the greed wash over his panic. He licked his lips. $500,000? Tomorrow? Yes. Isn't that amazing? We can finally buy that villa in Tuscany. I just need you to do one thing for me. Anything, babe. Don't do any banking today, I said, my voice sweet as poison. The bank said the transfer is sensitive. If there's any other activity on the account today, it might flag a fraud alert and freeze the funds for weeks. So just sit tight. Okay? I saw the wheels turning in his head. If he transferred the remaining money out today, or if he did anything suspicious, he might block the incoming $500,000. He was greedy. He would wait. He would want that $500,000 to steal along with the rest. Of course, Mark said, trying to suppress a grin. I won't touch a thing. I'll just wait for you to come home. Great. I'll be home around 7 p.m. Prepare a nice dinner? I want to celebrate. I will, he promised. Love you. Love you too, I said. I hung up. The smile dropped from my face instantly. Robert was slow clapping. Bravo, Elena. That was Oscar-worthy. He took the bait, I said. He won't leave the house. He'll be sitting there, salivating over money that doesn't exist. Good, Robert stood up. Now, let's go see the judge. We need an emergency order to freeze the actual accounts and an eviction notice for one Ms. Jessica Miller. We spent the rest of the morning running a marathon of legal hurdles. Affidavits, notarized signatures, a meeting with a judge who looked appalled when he saw the evidence of the forgery. By 2 p.m., we had everything. A restraining order against Mark for financial abuse and fraud. An eviction order for Jessica. An arrest warrant for Mark Hawthorne for forgery and attempted grand larceny. One more thing, I said to Robert as we walked out of the courthouse. He thinks I'm coming home at 7. He's going to try to act normal. He probably hid Jessica somewhere. Likely, Robert nodded. I want to catch them, I said. I don't want to just serve papers. I want to catch them celebrating. I checked the synchronized calendar again. Mark had added a new event for 5 p.m., dinner with Jay. He wasn't planning to hide her. He thought he had time before 7 p.m. He was going to have a little pre-celebration dinner with her before kicking her out for the night to play husband to me. We go in at 5:30, I said. I had 3 hours to kill. I went to a spa. Not to relax, but to armor up. I showered, washed the airport grime off my skin. I had a blowout. I put on my makeup, sharp eyeliner, red lipstick. The kind of lipstick that says war paint. I went to Nordstrom and bought a new outfit. My luggage was still in the trunk of the taxi I took earlier, but I didn't want to wear those clothes. They smelled like the victim I was yesterday. I bought a cream-colored Alexander McQueen suit. Structured. Powerful. Expensive. I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the tired wife from the terminal. She was a CEO. She was a shark. She was Elena Hawthorne, and she was about to conduct the most hostile takeover of her life. At 5 p.m., I met Robert and 2 uniformed police officers a block away from my house. The sky was dark already. The streetlights were humming. Are you ready? Robert asked, checking his watch. More than you know, I replied. Remember the plan, Robert said. Let the officers secure the perimeter. We go to the front door. You have the key? I have my spare, I said. Since he gave mine away. We rolled out. My heart was pounding, but it was a steady, heavy rhythm. Thud. 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 We pulled up to the house. It was blazing with light again. Music was playing. I could hear it faintly through the brick walls. Jazz. My jazz playlist. Mark's BMW was there. And a moving truck was parked in the street. My stomach clenched. A moving truck? I squinted. It wasn't loading. It was unloading. They were moving her furniture in. Before I was even dead and buried, metaphorically speaking. The arrogance was astounding. I walked up the driveway. The click-clack of my heels on the pavement sounded like gunshots in the quiet neighborhood. Robert flanked me on the right. The 2 officers flanked me on the left. I reached the front door. I didn't knock. I slid my key into the lock. It turned. I pushed the door open. The scene inside was almost comical in its cliché. The foyer was filled with boxes labeled Jessica's stuff. In the dining room, straight ahead, candles were lit. A catered dinner was laid out. Lobster. Champagne. Mark and Jessica were sitting at the table. They were toasting. To the 500,000, Mark was saying, raising his glass. And to getting the old hag out by the weekend. Jessica giggled, clinking her glass against his. I can't believe she believed you. She's so stupid. I'm home, honey. I announced, my voice booming through the hallway. The sound of shattering glass followed instantly. Mark dropped his champagne flute. It smashed against the hardwood floor, sending shards and expensive liquid everywhere. Jessica screamed, jumping up from her chair, clutching her belly. They both spun around to face the door. Mark's face went white. As white as the tablecloth. He saw me. In my power suit, looking impeccable. Then he saw Robert Stone. Then he saw the two police officers standing behind me with their hands on their belts. "Elena?" Mark stammered. His voice was an octave higher than usual. You're early. You said 7. I lied, I said, stepping into the room. I didn't yell. I spoke with a deadly calm. Just like you lied about the office. Just like you lied about the gambling. Just like you lied about her. I pointed a manicured finger at Jessica. She was trembling, looking back and forth between Mark and the police. "Mark, who are these people?" Jessica squeaked. "You said she wouldn't be here." "Shut up, Jessica," Mark hissed. He stepped forward, putting on his charm mask, though it was slipping fast. "Elena, baby, listen. This isn't what it looks like. Jessica, she's in trouble. She needed a place to stay. I was just helping her. The baby, she doesn't have anyone." "Stop," I said. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my purse. "Save the speech for the jury, Mark." "Jury?" Mark laughed nervously. "Elena, come on. We can talk about this. Why are the police here? This is a domestic dispute. Officers, you can leave. My wife is just being dramatic." Actually, Officer Miller stepped forward. "We aren't here for a domestic dispute, Mr. Hawthorne. We're here for a felony arrest." Mark froze. "What?" "Mark Hawthorne," the officer continued, pulling out handcuffs. "You are under arrest for forgery in the second degree, wire fraud, and attempted grand larceny." "Forgery?" Mark looked at me, wild-eyed. I didn't. "The quitclaim deed, Mark," I said, walking closer to him. "The one you signed my name on. The one you were going to file today. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I don't get notifications when legal documents are generated in my name?" I was just fixing the paperwork." Mark yelled, backing away. "It was for tax purposes. Elena, tell them." "And the money?" I asked. "The $180,000 you drained from our savings? The $50,000 credit card debt? Is that for taxes too?" I turned to Jessica. She was pressing herself against the wall, trying to become invisible. "And you," I said. She flinched. "You're trespassing," I said. "This house belongs to the Hawthorne Trust. Mark is not the owner. I am the trustee. And you have exactly 5 minutes to get your boxes, your pregnant belly, and your ungrateful self off my property before I have you arrested for aiding and abetting a fraud." Mark said it was his house. Jessica cried, tears streaming down her face. "He said you were divorcing. He said you were crazy." "He lied to you too, sweetheart," I said coldly. "He's broke. He has nothing. The cars? Leased in my name. The accounts? Frozen as of an hour ago. The house? Mine." I looked back at Mark. The officers were grabbing his arms. "Wait. Elena." Mark struggled. "The $500,000. The bonus. We can use that to fix this. We can pay it back." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh this time. "There is no bonus, Mark. There is no $500,000. I made it up to keep you here. To keep you from running until the warrant was signed." The color drained from his face completely. The realization hit him. He had stayed for a phantom pot of gold, and it had cost him his freedom. You be asterisk TCH, he screamed, lunging at me. The officer slammed him against the wall. Thud. Get him out of here, I said, turning my back on him. Elena. Don't do this. I love you. It was a mistake. His screams faded as they dragged him out the front door, past the Jessica's stuffed boxes. I stood in the dining room. The silence rushed back in, heavy and thick. Jessica was still there, sobbing. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear. You knew he was married, I said, not looking at her. You ate at my table. You took my advice. You betrayed me. Get out. Now. She ran. She didn't even grab her boxes. She just ran out the door into the cold night. Robert Stone walked up to me and handed me a glass of champagne, from the bottle Mark had opened. To justice, he suggested. I took the glass. I looked at the smashed shards on the floor. I looked at the empty chair where my husband had sat moments ago, toasting to my destruction. To justice, I said. And I drank. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no. Mark was in jail, yes. But I soon found out that the rabbit hole went deeper. Much deeper. As I began to clean up the mess he left behind, I found a burner phone taped under the drawer of his desk. And when I turned it on, I realized that Jessica wasn't the only secret Mark was keeping. And she wasn't the only one he had promised my house to. The police lights had faded. The sirens were a distant memory echoing in the cold Chicago night. The front door was closed, locked with a deadbolt I had instinctively replaced immediately after the officers dragged Mark away. I was alone. Finally alone in the house I had fought so hard to keep. But it didn't feel like a victory yet. It felt like walking through a graveyard. I stood in the center of Mark's home office. This room used to smell like cedar and expensive bourbon, a scent I once associated with success, but now realized was just the cologne of a con artist. I sat in his leather chair, the leather creaking under me, and looked at the burner phone I had found taped beneath the drawer. It was a cheap prepaid smartphone. A burner. The kind drug dealers use in movies. Or, apparently, husbands who are living double lives. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the residual adrenaline of the confrontation. I pressed the power button. It flickered to life. Of course, it was passcode. But Mark was a creature of habit, and arrogance makes people sloppy. He had used his birthday for our joint accounts. He used Win for his email. I tried 1-2-3-4. Incorrect. I tried 0-0-0-0. Incorrect. Then I thought about Jessica. The love of his life. I typed in the date of the ultrasound I had seen in the file earlier. 0-6-1-5, click. The screen unlocked. I felt a wave of nausea. He was so predictable it was insulting. I navigated to the text messages. I expected to find love notes to Jessica, maybe some trash talking about me. And I did. There were hundreds of messages between them, vile, laughing emojis about my old lady clothes, photos of them in my bed, plans for the nursery. But then I saw a thread with a contact named simply The Investor. My investor brain kicked in. Mark didn't have investors. His consulting firm was a shell. I opened the thread. The Investor, payment due Tuesday. Don't be late, Mark. Mark, I'll have it. My wife is liquidating a portfolio. Big bonus coming. The Investor, we don't care about your wife. We care about the $50K plus interest. You're already 2 weeks behind. Mark, I know. Just give me until Friday. Once I get her signature on the house, I can leverage the equity. The Investor, Friday. Noon. Or we stop asking nicely and start visiting Oakwood Drive. My blood ran cold. I scrolled up. This went back months. The investor wasn't a bank. It was a loan shark. And not a friendly one. There were veiled threats, photos of Mark walking into his gym, photos of me. There was a photo of me getting coffee at Starbucks 3 weeks ago. The investor, she looks healthy. Would be a shame if she had an accident before the transfer clears. I dropped the phone on the desk as if it were burning hot. Mark hadn't just been stealing from me to fund a mistress. He was gambling again. Or bad investments. It didn't matter. He was in deep with dangerous people, and he had used me and my house as collateral. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a liability that could have gotten me killed. I stood up and paced the room. The silence of the house was suddenly menacing. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. We start visiting Oakwood Drive. That was the threat. I realized then that sending Mark to jail wasn't just revenge, it might have been the only thing that saved my life. But now, with Mark in custody and the assets frozen, these investors wouldn't get paid. And they knew where I lived. I grabbed my laptop and the burner phone. I couldn't stay here tonight. Not alone. I called Robert Stone. It was nearly midnight. Elena? His voice was groggy. What happened? Did he make bail? No, I said, my voice shaking. Robert, it's worse. I found a phone. Mark owes money to loan sharks. They have photos of me. There was a pause on the line. Then, Robert's voice shifted from sleepy lawyer to sharp protector. Get out of the house. Now. Do not pack a bag. Just get in your car and drive to the Palmer House Hilton downtown. Valet parking, security cameras everywhere. I'll meet you for breakfast. Bring the phone. Okay. Elena, he added. You just handed the district attorney the rest of his case. Mark isn't seeing daylight for a very, very long time. I hung up. I grabbed my purse and the keys to the BMW, Mark's car, technically, but I paid for it. I walked out of the house, locking the door behind me. I looked at the dark street. The wind howled through the trees. For 20 years, I thought my husband was my partner. Tonight, I realized he was the one who had painted a target on my back. As I drove toward the city, watching the Chicago skyline glitter in the distance, I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt a cold, hard resolve. Mark thought he was playing a game with my money? He had no idea. He had invited wolves into our lives, and now I was going to have to be the one to hunt them down. The next morning, the breakfast room at the Palmer House was buzzing with business meetings and tourists, a stark contrast to the dark underworld I had glimpsed on that phone screen. Robert Stone sat across from me, sipping black coffee. He had already reviewed the texts on the burner phone. This is organized crime, Elena, Robert said, keeping his voice low. Or at least, organized enough to be dangerous. High-interest illegal lending. It explains where the cash withdrawals went. He told me he was investing in crypto, I said, stirring my untouched oatmeal. He told Jessica he was renovating the house. He told the sharks he was leveraging my equity. He lied to everyone. It's a Ponzi scheme of lies, Robert agreed. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you were the bank. What do I do, Robert? They know where I live. We turn this over to the police immediately. This elevates Mark's situation from fraud to endangerment. But more importantly, we need to secure your assets. If these people think they have a claim on your house because of Mark's verbal promises, they might try to file liens or intimidate you. They can try, I said, my grip tightening on my coffee cup. I'm not running, Robert. I worked too hard for that house. I'm not letting a bunch of thugs scare me off. We'll hire private security, Robert noted. 24/7 rotation at the house for the next month. But Elena, you need to be prepared. The fallout from this, it's going to get messy before it gets clean. He was right. By the time I left the hotel, the news had broken. Not the loan shark details, but the arrest. Prominent Lake Forest husband arrested for fraud. Elena Hawthorne, real estate mogul, files charges. My phone was blowing up. Friends, colleagues, business rivals. Everyone wanted the gossip. I turned it off. I had one person I needed to see. I went to the bank. I needed to see the full extent of the damage to the accounts I hadn't checked yesterday. The Dream Villa fund was gone, I knew that. But Mark had access to other things. I sat down with the branch manager, a woman I had known for 10 years. She looked pale. Elena, she said softly. We flagged some transactions this morning after the arrest warrant was published. But they cleared 2 days ago. What transactions? He liquidated the children's college funds, she whispered. I stared at her. We didn't have children. But we had set up 529 plans for my nieces and nephews. Education funds. Money meant for their future. How much? I asked, my voice barely a croak. $60,000. He forged her co-signature. I closed my eyes. It wasn't just my money. He stole from my sister's kids. He stole from innocent children to pay off his gambling debts and buy designer purses for his mistress. That was the moment any lingering trace of pity I had for Mark evaporated. I wasn't just divorcing him. I was going to ensure he never touched a cent again. Freeze it all, I told the manager. Every account with his name on it. If he tries to buy a stick of gum in the commissary at the jail, I want the card to decline. Leaving the bank, I walked to my car in the parking lot. The winter wind whipped my hair across my face. I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. That's when I saw it. Tucked under the windshield wiper was a small white envelope. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked around. The parking lot was busy. No one looked suspicious. I rolled down the window and snatched the envelope. Inside was a single index card. No stamp. No address. Just 3 words written in block letters, pay his debt. I stared at the card. They found me. Even here. They were watching. Fear tried to claw its way up my throat, but I shoved it down. I thought about the steel line Robert had told me to find within myself. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the card. I sent it to the detective handling Mark's case. Then I sent a text to Robert, they made contact. Initiate the scorched earth protocol. I wasn't going to pay his debt. I was going to leverage it. Mark was in jail, safe and sound. I was out here dealing with his mess. Well, if he wanted to play games with dangerous people, he could deal with the consequences. I started the car. I wasn't going back to the hotel. I was going to the county jail. It was time Mark knew exactly what he had unleashed. The Cook County Jail is a bleak place. Gray walls, fluorescent lights that hum with a headache-inducing frequency, and the smell of industrial cleaner masking the scent of sweat and despair. I sat in the visitation room. There was a thick plexiglass barrier between the inmates and the visitors. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded on the metal table, wearing my Alexander McQueen suit. I looked like I was attending a board meeting. The door on the other side buzzed open. Mark shuffled in. He looked small. The arrogant man in the cashmere coat at the airport was gone. In his place was a man in a bright orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. His hair was unwashed, standing up in erratic tufts. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were red-rimmed and puffy. He saw me and rushed to the glass, grabbing the phone receiver. Elena. Elena, thank God. I picked up the phone slowly. Hello, Mark. Elena, you have to get me out of here, he pleaded, his voice cracking. It's a nightmare in here. The guy in my cell, he screams all night. The food. I can't eat. You have to post bail. Please. I'll sign whatever you want. I'll give you the house. Just get me out. I watched him quietly. You can't give me the house, Mark. It's already mine. Remember? He flinched. Okay. Look, I'm sorry. I messed up. The affair, it was a mistake. Jessica meant nothing to me. It was a midlife crisis. I love you. We can fix this. Stop, I said. My voice was calm, devoid of emotion. I didn't come here to hear your apologies. I came here to show you this. I held up the index card against the glass. Pay his debt. Mark's face went from pathetic to terrified in a split second. All the color drained from his skin. He recoiled as if the card were a physical weapon. Where did you get that? He whispered. On my windshield. This morning. At the bank where I found out you stole my niece's college funds. Mark began to shake. Elena, you don't understand. These guys, they're not regular collectors. They'll hurt you. They'll hurt me? I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. You put them on me, Mark. You gave them my name. You promised them my assets. I was going to pay them back. With what? My money? I leaned closer to the glass. Here is the situation, Mark. I gave this card to the police. Along with your burner phone. Mark squeezed his eyes shut. Oh my God. You gave them the phone? Everything. The texts. The threats. The photos. The district attorney is very interested in your investors. They're adding money laundering to your charge sheet. And since you were borrowing money for illegal gambling, that's RICO territory. Elena, please, he sobbed now, tears streaming down his stubbly cheeks. If they know I talked, if they know the cops have the phone. I'm a dead man in here. You have to drop the charges. If I'm out, I can fix it. I can talk to them. You aren't getting out, Mark. Bail was denied this morning because of the flight risk and the intimidation potential. You are staying right here. They'll kill me, he shrieked, slamming his hand against the glass. The guard behind him stepped forward. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you kissed a pregnant woman's stomach in front of your wife, I said coldly. I stood up. I'm filing for an annulment based on fraud, not just divorce. I'm taking everything, Mark. The cars are being repossessed tomorrow. Your consulting firm is being audited. And I've already informed your parents. He looked up, broken. You told my mom? I sent her the video from the airport, I lied. I hadn't yet, but I wanted him to feel the shame. She knows her son isn't a success. She knows he's a thief who steals from children. Elena. Goodbye, Mark. Enjoy the orange. It really isn't your color. I hung up the phone. I turned and walked away. I could hear him screaming my name through the glass, muffled and desperate. Elena. Elena. Don't leave me here. I didn't look back. Walking out of that jail, into the crisp air, I felt a weight lift off my chest. The fear of the loan sharks was still there, managed by the security team now parked outside my house, but the fear of losing myself? That was gone. I had faced the monster, and I realized he was just a scared little man in a costume. 3 days later, the house was quiet. The security guard, a burly man named Mike, was parked in the driveway. I was in the kitchen, finally clearing out the Jessica's stuff boxes that had been left in the foyer. I was burning them. Well, not burning them. That would be unsafe. I was donating them to a women's shelter, but emotionally, I was setting them on fire. Baby clothes. Maternity dresses. Expensive lotions. All bought with my money. The doorbell rang. I checked the security monitor. It was her. Jessica. She looked terrible. Her hair was messy, her face blotchy from crying. She was wearing a coat that looked too thin for the Chicago wind. She was shivering on my porch. Mike, the security guard, stepped out of his car and approached her. I saw him talking to her, gesturing for her to leave. She was pleading, pointing at the door. I pressed the intercom button. "Let her in, Mike." I needed to hear this. I opened the door. Jessica stood there, looking like a frightened deer. "Mrs. Hawthorne," she whispered. She didn't call me Elena anymore. "You have 5 minutes," I said, leaving the door open. "What do you want?" "I have nowhere to go," she sobbed. "My parents, they saw the news. They kicked me out. They said I brought shame on the family. Mark's accounts are frozen. The hotel kicked me out because the credit card declined." She looked at me with desperate, tear-filled eyes. "I'm pregnant, Mrs. Hawthorne. I have no money. I haven't eaten since yesterday." A part of me, the old Elena, the one who mentored her, felt a twinge of pity. But then I remembered the text messages. "Old lady clothes. Stupid hag." "That sounds like a difficult situation," I said, my voice steady. "But I fail to see how it is my problem. You were very eager to move into this house and kick me out 3 days ago." "I was stupid," she cried. "Mark, he charmed me. He told me you were abusive. He told me you were cold. He said you trapped him. And you believed him because you wanted the money," I cut in. "You didn't love him, Jessica. You loved the idea of the Lake Forest lifestyle. You saw a shortcut, and you took it." She hung her head. "Please. Can you help me? Just a little cash? For the baby?" I looked at her stomach. The innocent life caught in the middle of this mess. "I won't give you money," I said. "Because I know you'll just use it to run or chase another rich Mark. But..." I pulled a card from my pocket. It wasn't a credit card. It was a business card. "This is the number for a legal aid clinic and a shelter for expectant mothers. They will give you food, a bed, and medical care. They will also help you file a paternity suit against Mark, so when he eventually gets out of prison, if he ever does, his wages will be garnished for child support." She took the card, her hands shaking. "That's it? That is more than you deserve," I said. "And Jessica?" She looked up. "Mark used your identity too." I dropped the bomb. Her eyes widened. "What?" "I found the papers in his office. He opened 3 credit cards in your name last month. To pay the interest on his loans. You aren't just broke, Jessica. You're about $50,000 in debt." She gasped, clutching her chest. "No, he wouldn't." "He did. He steals from everyone. Wives, nieces, mistresses. You were just another credit line to him." She collapsed onto her knees on the porch, sobbing uncontrollably. The reality of her fairy tale had finally disintegrated completely. She wasn't the chosen one. She was just another victim of a narcissist. "Go to the shelter," I said softly. "Get a lawyer. And never, ever come back here." I closed the door. I watched her on the monitor as she slowly stood up and walked down the driveway, a broken figure in the gray light. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad. Sad for the waste of it all. But I also felt clean. The last remnant of Mark's lies had just walked off my property. Now, only the legal battle remained. The legal proceedings took 6 months. It was a media circus. The real estate tycoon versus the con artist husband. Robert Stone was magnificent. He orchestrated the case like a conductor leading a symphony of destruction. Mark tried everything. First, he tried to plead insanity. He claimed the gambling addiction made him not responsible for his actions. The court-appointed psychiatrist laughed that out of the room. Then, he tried to claim I was complicit. That I knew about the investors and approved the loans. That was his biggest mistake. I took the stand on a rainy Tuesday in April. The courtroom was packed. I saw Mark's parents in the back row. They looked aged, shrunken. They refused to make eye contact with me. Mark's defense attorney, a sweaty public defender who clearly wanted to be anywhere else, asked me, "Mrs. Hawthorne, isn't it true that you manage the finances? How could you not know about $200,000 missing?" I leaned into the microphone. "Because I trusted my husband," I said clearly. "I was busy building the fortune he was busy stealing. And as for my complicity..." I looked directly at Mark. He was pale, gaunt, shaking his leg nervously under the table. "I am the one who turned in the burner phone. I am the one who gave the police the evidence of the loan sharks. If I were complicit, why would I hand over the smoking gun?" The jury nodded. I could see it in their eyes. They believed me. Then came the testimony of the investor. The police had used Mark's phone to track down the loan shark ring. They offered a plea deal to the low-level enforcer in exchange for testimony against the ringleader and Mark. The enforcer, a man with a neck tattoo, testified that Mark had indeed offered his wife's life insurance policy as collateral if he couldn't pay. The courtroom gasped. I felt a chill, even though I knew it was coming. Hearing it out loud, that my husband had considered my death a financial strategy, was a different kind of horror. Mark put his head in his hands. He knew it was over. The morality clause in the trust was the final nail in the coffin for the civil suit. The judge ruled that by moving Jessica in, Mark had violated the terms of the trust and the postnuptial agreement, which Robert had brilliantly argued the trust acted as. Mark was stripped of all claims to the house, the retirement accounts, and future earnings. But the criminal trial was the main event. The verdict came back in under 4 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Fraud. Forgery. Grand larceny. Money laundering. Conspiracy. When the foreman read the verdict, Mark didn't cry. He just slumped in his chair, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. He looked at me one last time. There was no hate in his eyes anymore. Just emptiness. I didn't look away. I witnessed it. I needed to see the end. Sentencing day was 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on her nose, looked at Mark with undisguised disgust. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said. "You had everything. A loving wife, a comfortable life, opportunity. And you threw it away for greed and ego. You not only stole from your wife, you stole from children. You endangered your family by involving organized crime. You have shown no remorse, only self-pity." Mark stood there, silent. "I sentence you to 8 to 12 years in a state penitentiary," the gavel banged. "With a mandatory restitution order of $280,000 to be paid to Elena Hawthorne and the associated trust funds. 8 years. He would go in a 50-year-old man who thought he was a king. He would come out nearly 60, a convicted felon with nothing to his name." As the bailiff handcuffed him to lead him away, Mark stopped. He turned to the gallery. He looked at me. "Elena," he mouthed. "I'm sorry." I didn't mouth anything back. I just nodded. Acknowledgement, not forgiveness. Forgiveness was for God, I was just the ex-wife who survived. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The reporters were there, flashing cameras, shouting questions. "Elena. How do you feel? Did you get your money back? What will you do now?" I stopped at the top of the stairs. I put on my sunglasses. I said to the nearest microphone, like I finally got my keys back. I walked to my car, a brand new Audi I had bought for myself the day the divorce was finalized. No more paying for Mark's BMW. I drove home. Lake Forest was beautiful in the spring. The trees were blooming. The air smelled of lilacs. I pulled into my driveway. The house, my house, stood proud and white against the blue sky. The Jessica stuffed boxes were long gone. The bad energy was scrubbed away by sage and expensive cleaning crews. I walked inside. It was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It's been a year since that day at the airport. A lot has changed. I sold the Lake Forest house. Yes, after fighting so hard for it, I realized I didn't want it anymore. It was a museum of a dead marriage. I sold it for a massive profit, the market was hot, and I bought a penthouse in the city, overlooking the river. It's modern, sleek, and entirely me. No guest room for nurseries. Just a massive art studio where I've started painting again, a passion Mark always told me was a waste of time. I got my money back. Well, most of it. The restitution will take forever, but the seizure of Mark's hidden assets and the sale of his sports memorabilia collection covered the children's college funds. I topped them off with my own bonus. My nieces are going to college, and they know their Aunt Elena has their back. As for Jessica? I heard through the grapevine she had a baby boy. She moved back to her hometown in Ohio. She's working as a receptionist and living with her grandmother. It's a hard life, but an honest one. I hope she learns from it. I hope she teaches her son to respect women, unlike his father. And me? I'm sitting here, on my balcony, drinking a glass of that Napa Valley Cabernet I never got to open with Mark. It tastes better this way. I'm dating again. His name is David. He's an architect. He has his own money, his own career, and he holds the door open for me not because he wants something, but because he respects me. We're taking it slow. I'm not rushing into anything. I learned my lesson. I keep the burner phone in a safe deposit box. Not because I need the evidence, but as a reminder. A reminder that I am not just a wife, not just a financier, not just a victim. I am a survivor. Mark thought he could replace me. He thought I was just a fixture in his life, easily swapped out for a younger, shinier model. But he forgot the most important rule of business and life: never underestimate the person who built the castle you're living in. Because if they know how to build it, they definitely know how to bring it down on top of your head. So, to everyone watching this, if your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. If you come home early and something feels off, don't ignore it. And never, ever give anyone the power to destroy you. Keep your own keys. Keep your own counsel. And if you have to fight, win. I'm Elena Hawthorne. And this was my story. Thank you for listening.